All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. Today, we've got a special treat on our hands because we've got an amazing guest joining us. He's a guy that I don't know if I actually really told him how much I look up to him, but his story is powerful. He is just an awesome guy out there doing amazing work for the right reasons. He's a guy that comes through just so humble, so authentic, so real, so transparent. And today, you get to hear his story. So, welcome, Alex Calderon, to the show. I appreciate you being here, friend.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I always wanted to jump on, and then once communicate that, I was like, I'm gonna hop on board.
Well, I appreciate you falling for that trap, but whatever it took to get you here, man, I appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy doing a lot of things, taking whatever time that you can give us to share your thoughts, your wisdom, your story with the rest of us, man, we are appreciative. So thank you so much. Do you mind? We'll just do the thing that we always do on podcasts, the things that we do on every interview now, and just start off with, can you introduce yourself to the world, the people that haven't quite connected with you yet?
Hey, so my name's Alex Calderon. I'm a first generation teacher here in New York City, borough of Queens, particularly, which is it's weird. It feels like life has come back full circle right now. I was actually born, I want to say 10, 15 minutes away from where I teach now in my current middle school. So it feels like odd. I run a podcast called First Gen Teacher Lens. And yeah, it started because I felt like a lot of there wasn't many or any, I didn't see any educational podcasts that talked about being a first generation teacher. Because I know I have quite a few friends, but they don't have podcasts. So that was one of the pivotal reasons why I started First Gen Teacher Lens. And yeah, it's been fun since it's been a little bit under a year since I've been starting the podcast.
That's awesome. Well, you and we're a little bit different because you said you've got a lot of friends, but they don't have podcasts. For me, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I don't have a lot of friends, man. So I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts and wisdom today. But let's pick apart this whole idea of a first gen teacher.
Mm.
When you say first gen, for the people out there that don't understand that concept or that terminology, walk us through that. What is a first gen teacher?
So a first gen teacher is somebody that perhaps has immigrant parents and they've, come here to quote unquote catch the American dream and they were the first people born here. And so for me, it's kind of the way I think of generation teacher is you're trying to navigate this limo space of professionalism, also in academia, where sometimes honestly, like if you don't have a good network, you feel kind of like on an island by yourself because there's no kind of like it's like kind of like working with FAFSA, right? Like that was a struggle for me where nobody in my family like knew what FAFSA was, or I have to give you my taxes. What do you mean? And then they'll get mad at you. No, mom, I'm not trying to swindle your tax money. But yeah, it was definitely a struggle in terms of like actually being a first generation teacher, navigating it against that sense of professionalism and academia, which also means higher ed, like pursuing a grad degree and kind of like going through that process and kind of breaking that kind of chain or barrier, whether it be in one's head or kind of like because you definitely feel pressure being the first one to graduate. So that's the essence of being a first gen teacher. It's like a weird space to be in, and also like kind of also relatable to other students who are first generation, and it's kind of awe inspiring when they see you in the classroom, which makes you feel like awesome. Like I don't know how to else describe it. Like when I first stepped in the classroom, and then kids knew my last name ethnically, and they pronounced it phonetically in Spanish, and they're like, oh, he's like a part of this culture. So it's kind of navigating that space.
When did your parents come to the States?
My parents came, I believe my father a little bit earlier, maybe in the 80s. And then my mother came in the 90s at age 15. Yeah,
Wow.
she came here at 15. Yeah.
Okay. And so they met in New York. Is that the
Yeah.
story?
So they met in New York and then, yeah, they met in New York and then that's it. And then the rest of my family came to, originally they went to they landed in California. Then I guess we had quasi family members, like friends of families, and then she came to New York, Queens, and then I've been here ever since.
Well,
And yeah, so it's been a whirlwind of like, telling me their story, and then kind of me going through my own struggles with in I guess like American schooling,
yeah.
because initially I was an ESL student to first when I first started out school.
Wow. So as you're talking, I'm thinking back to my own childhood. So
Hmm.
I grew up in a military household, so we were traveling all over the place. And then
Hmm.
when I graduated high school, I remember I set off and said I was going to go to college and went 1,000 miles away to go to college. And for me, the novelty of my journey was I was the first person in my family to ever go to college, and I thought that was a pretty big deal.
Hmm.
And I got a lot of praise and love from my parents and accolades for going and doing something that they could never do, or they chose not to ever do. So
Hmm.
then I took that and I one upped it and said, okay, now I'm going to get my master's. And then I went to law school and then got my doctorate. But it was all to try to prove to my parents, honestly, as I look back on it now and reflect and have talking to a therapist about it. I know that the reason I kept chasing all of these milestones was just to make my parents proud, so that they could latch on to me and say, wow, you did it, son. You accomplished something that they didn't either think they could do, should do, whatever. Do your do your parents celebrate all that you're becoming and how amazing this journey is that you're on?
Um, so more so my mom, because like my parents separated,
Uh-huh.
unfortunately. So it's more so my mom and then my uncle, who's been that, I guess, father figure. So they do celebrate it in terms of like, we ironically earlier today we were just talking about it, and like kind of breaking that cycle, because I have an older brother that chose not to pursue higher academics. So when I was like, reflecting on it, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I know I wanted a degree in something and help youth. So like, definitely they're proud of me in terms of like, what I'm accomplishing now, especially for them, uh, due to a civil war, they couldn't. Um, my mom, I don't think she got past the second grade in her
Mm.
country, so because the teachers were so afraid to teach that they wouldn't go to the school. So that's a story I hear, I think, since I was maybe like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So that's definitely, I think, now that I'm thinking about it, what led me to, I think, and spark something in the educational field.
That's fascinating. But for you, I mean, you don't know anything different than other than Queens and New York. And I mean, you've been surrounded by the American life, right? And the American dream. And if you work hard, all of your dreams will be given to you. That type of mindset. I mean, it inundates you. You're
Mhm.
in school and teachers tell you you can accomplish anything you put your mind and your heart to. Did you always believe that? Like when you first start off as a kindergarten, first grade, going through elementary, did you believe, hey, I can do anything that I want to?
Um, Reflecting back on it, uh, yes and no, because like, as I got older, I started to think about how divisive some of the communities were
Mm,
when I was growing up. Like especially when I was like I knew when I was in high school, that's when it hit me. Like I knew where I live was different from where everybody else was, in terms of like, you know, schooling wise, right? So my school was one of the first schools to be taken over in New York, or if not the only one, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So in terms of like, my family instilling that, yes, but overall in school, did I feel that? No, because I think there was like a lot of when I especially felt it in like maybe 8th grade and then up until 12th grade, that I was like, there's I basically I did I went to a different high school, and we did one day where you swap high schools, which is kind of I guess a way to like see what's going on in other communities. But then you saw like, all right, we don't have the same stuff. So like that's where it clicked on me. I was just like, all right, what's actually going on in my school district that's like n- not happening in other school districts. But in terms of a filial experience, I definitely had that, upward push of, hey, as long as you set your mind to it, like you can accomplish whatever you want, no matter your circumstances.
Mm. So you went to a school that was taken over. You got to see schools on the other side of town that had the sparkly things and the shiny devices and all of that stuff. Some people would get bitter. Some people would get frustrated. Some people would throw up their hands and say, I give up. The cards are stacked against me. But we were talking before we started recording. I mean, you're in the trenches right now, pursuing yet another degree, like doing all
Mhm.
the things. You have doubled down on school and on the purpose of it and the power behind being educated.
Mhm.
Where does that come from? Where does this true belief in education and the the potential and the possibilities that exist behind being educated, where does that come from?
I think if for me, it first started off in, I want to say, probably junior year of high school. I have this guidance counselor. Her name is Miss Alamia, and she saw that I had, okay average. I want to say like I was B plus, maybe cuts to A minus, and then she was just like, all right, these are the schools that you can look at. And I told her, look, I don't have that many APs, so like probably like not a lot of 4-year schools are going to look at me because I don't have those, college credits. But what she told me was there's this program here in New York, and it started actually in the community system. It's called HEOP, Higher Education Opportunity Program. Then I was part of the state kind of initiative, which is called EOP, Educational Opportunity Program. And that program was geared towards first generation kids, kids that have gone through some financial situations that kind of impeded and prevented their or made their education like stagnant, right?
Mhm.
So those counselors and those teachers that we did worked with in the summer. So I spent an extra summer before going into undergrad, and they gave us pep talks, and then some of the counselors were also first generation as well. So Miss Alamia and those counselors in the AOP program definitely instilled in me, hey, this just because you had some obstacles doesn't mean you can thrive in education. And I think that's where that drive to become a teacher came in, right? And that's what I want to instill to all my students, and particularly, be a kind of like a model, or I guess like, example that like, hey, like, we're part of the same kind of, overall culture, and like me and you are similar in that essence, but also like I understand that like, you are our experience could be similar, can be
Mm.
similar. So right, so that's where I that program definitely instilled in me, like looking back at it.
With this, I'm going to give you a compliment, but also push back a little bit, because the compliment I want to give you is that, number one, you're amazing. You're inspiring to me. You are you're a powerful guy, and I don't know that you necessarily understand or embrace how powerful your story is and your messaging. You're giving credit to a counselor who did something amazing and pointed you in the right direction and gave you hope and showed you this amazing opportunity. But there are a lot of other people that would have heard, before you can go to school, you have to jump through another hoop.
Mm,
Before you can go follow your dreams, there's one more thing that you have to do, who would have heard that and said, well, then I'm not doing it. Then I
right.
give up. It's yet another roadblock put in front of me. Why did you see it as an opportunity and not an obstacle?
Hold on. I gotta think about that one. It's put me on the spot. For me, definitely like, um, there were personal things that like impeded my brother in terms of like, I want to say finishing for my his degree, right? He started off at community college and then dropped out. And then like for me, like I have a younger sister who's in high school now,
Mm.
and she's asked me various questions like, hey, should I take this AP course? oh, I have this English teacher. I basically know the whole English staff in my former high school. So she's like, how is this teacher? I'm like, he's good. You'll probably not like her, but like, cause you'll probably think it's boring. But I think that part of me is like, my mindset, I think now that I know the term like growth mindset. I think for some reason I always had that within me where, one of my favorite poets is, he's from Detroit. I'm blank on his name right now, but there's this one poet that I always like reflect on in terms of, wherever I'm feeling down. And like I found that, I want to say like maybe probably in, maybe senior year, like my one of my English teachers like mentioned him, and then I forgot about him after a while, and then like that kind of went back. But like when I was in classes, one of the most powerful books that I ever read was Night by Elie Wiesel.
Mhm.
And hearing his struggle, man, like going through all that and then still like persevering and then coming out with this, uh is opus magnus, right,
Mhm.
which is book. And that to me, I think the English staff, like that book was so powerful that like it kind of drove me to like, hey, if he can go through this, like I got my own stuff to go through, so I can like definitely push through and like get educated.
Do you feel as though you're a lucky recipient of just being surrounded by amazing educators? Because I feel like in your story right now, this is the story that I keep hearing. You're connecting all of these dots to your success, your drive is a result of whether it's a senior year English teacher or a guidance counselor or an educational experience you might have had in elementary school. Like you're connecting all of these dots of your journey to the schools that you've gone through. I hear from a lot of people who say they're doing what they're doing in spite of the education they received. I'm hearing you say very loud and clear, you're doing what you do because of the education you received.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are in spite of things. So I moved to like a bunch of different schools, but at every school, I got so lucky.
Mm.
Like from my high school career, I was in almost four different high schools. So, like my last high school was originally where I was like, my hometown, which changed dramatically since like when I was younger, it was the time where the state took over, and then I was pulled from that school because like like the the management of the school district was not good.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like I got lucky when I went back that I had, I want to say, a few teachers where they really like looked out for me, like in terms of like even my media teacher, she looked at my like college entrance essay, which like which it was a blessing in disguise, like. And there are those pockets of teachers that I do remember that really pushed me to, I want to say, that next level and really helped me understand like, hey, there you may have had some obstacles, but like there's something in the water in terms of like we see a lot of potential in you, and you can be successful. And I knew that first instance just talking to my like senior English teacher, like I said before. I showed him my acceptance letter, and then one day I was just chit chatting in class, and then he called me out on it, and I was like, Mr. Fridge, you gotta cut me some slack. And then he's like, come on, like you're almost done. He's like, Mr. Fritz, and then he said something like, said my school's name, Geneseo, and then he was like, "It's knocking, but you're not there yet." And I like remember spot on saying, "Mr. Fritz, you know I'm in." Out of everybody in the senior class, like not to like toot my own horn, I'm reliable in terms of like like I'll like manage in like undergrad. And then his like face turned bright red, and then he just carried on with the class.
Mm. Wow, that's awesome. So let's fast forward 10 years into your future. And there's a song out right now by a group named Rascal Flats, and basic premise of the song is, it's not if you'll be remembered, it's how you'll be remembered.
Mhm.
So in 10 years, you've got some former students of yours that are going back and they're telling stories about you,
Mhm.
similar to the stories you're telling about teachers. What kind of stories are they telling about you?
10 years from now.
Yeah.
I mean, this year, I mean, although I'm just thinking about like the class from like this year, 10 years. But yeah, I'm gonna be like put my mindset in the student. Yeah, remember when we had uh Mr. C and like it was like COVID was like everywhere and he would always post these like fake TikTok videos. Cause I do that all the time for like my kids, because like my school is remote. So like I've been like since last year, I want to say since COVID like hit March,
Mm-hmm.
I just started creating content like these fake videos that related to school and the kids, just to like kind of make it funny. So I think honestly, like those kids are gonna remember me from those videos,
That's
and they
awesome.
and they're gonna be like, man, like he was really funny. Because like sometimes like I had to delete the comments because they'll write LMAO, and like I'm like it's like Google Classrooms. I have to take them off. So like, but I think honestly, that's like thinking about now. Like, I hope they think those videos were so funny.
That's so good. So your focus with your students, with your kids, is really on connection. So when
Yeah.
I said how are they going to remember, you're thinking about the emotional attachment they're going to have to you.
Hmm.
They thought that you cared about them enough to go above and beyond. That you're funny. You've got a sense of humor. It's not about the content necessarily. It's about you and how you make the students feel. That's deep, man. That's deep. Um, so move on to next year,
Hmm.
when you're not going to be doing everything remote, where you're going to be back to seeing your kiddos more frequently than you have been accustomed to over the last year, or
Hmm.
even 3 years, 5 years from now.
Hmm.
Do you still see yourself with that ability to connect with your kids? Because again, a unique characteristic that you have is, where other people see obstacles, you see opportunities. There are people over the last year who have said, I can't connect with my kids because I'm virtual. And you're saying,
Hmm.
I'm connecting with my kids because I'm virtual. I'm
Hmm.
able to do something I wasn't able to do before. And I'm rising to the challenge.
Right.
So go into the future where everything's not going to be virtual. Are you still going to be able to connect with your kids like you do now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, I'm just thinking about previously when I was like in person, right? When we had a debate for argumentative unit, and I would dress up as a judge. So like I wore my like old like cap and gown, or well, I brought like a wig on Amazon. So yeah, definitely like there'll be moments where like you got to make engaging and fun. And in terms of like that, like for me the connection matters. Like the connection goes in hand with the content, right?
Mm.
So like whatever the kids are listening to, like I'll try to connect whatever we're learning. So for example, poetry, I remember one year we were in person and then we were talking about automatopoeia, and then the kids for some reason kept on mentioning this TikTok that went ratatata or something like that, and then I connected that noise to like automatopoeia. I was like, this is why it makes sense. They were like, they never forgot automatopoeia, although it wasn't on the state exam. But it'll be those moments like where you're intuitively, what are your students like really connecting to? Because at the end of the day, if you don't connect with your audience, your students, then that's where your content could falter, right?
Mm.
Instead of making it, you know, arduous, like, hey, let's just go over the content and then have like, maybe prompts that are kind of dry, instead of, maybe put yourself in a prompt or do a scenario that the kids remembered from maybe the day before. Put your students in this example, right? So that's how I'm gonna still keep doing that, and that's how I believe like I'll still connect with my kids. And then yeah, just make the class fun, make it lively, keep using my one of my llamas just for like popcorn reading, just toss it, although sometimes it gets out of hand, but that's when I gotta stop it.
Whatever. That means they're having fun and
Yeah.
they're connecting with it. That's so cool.
Right.
So like there might be some people listening who are thinking, All right, you're kind of setting an unrealistic expectation for all of us. You seem like just this nice guy who's out there working hard, doing things for the right reason, but you don't have to do all of this, man. You're out there chasing another degree in a pandemic. You've got a podcast. You are sitting here, you're a guest on my podcast. You're out there trying to change the world. Why don't you just sit still and just be? Why do you have to be looking for all these opportunities to keep doing? How do you respond to that?
I think that is, sometimes like, I'm not gonna like, like be like sugar. Sometimes like you need those days where you're just like, man, I need to like take some R&R. And like there were like 2 days this week where I'm shutting everything down. Like I was so stressed, but yeah, I mean, like if you're not pursuing knowledge and like seeking like other or hearing other voices, or looking at books or people that like have something vital to say to your field, then you're no longer like a lifelong learner,
Mm,
right? And that's where like the growth kind of uh stops or comes to a halt, where you should honestly like uh look at voices like yourself, right? And because like you definitely have a lot of meaningful stuff to say. Like one of the things that I was reflecting on, that I was like, man, that would be cool if my school could do that. Where you mentioned, where it caught my eye, I was like, that's what clicked. Like this is why I want to be an administrator. Where you were like, I forgot what you said. It was on Twitter. Um, it was something about like, let's have administrators talk to each other. Let's see what they're doing in different schools. How are they managing the pandemic instead of staying on this isolated island, right? And that's honestly what a lot of administrators should be doing.
yeah.
I know we're not, wholeheartedly. I don't think we are, because I know my admin's probably not doing that. We're just trying to stay afloat, if you will. But like, what's working at another school could work at your school. It may
Yeah.
not, but it's another option to kind of problem solve, and in instead of kind of remaining stagnant and kind of be like, no, I'm gonna work this problem out in house, right?
Yeah.
Because I've go ahead.
No. You're. I was just gonna say, preach, amen. Keep going, man.
So like, because like for me, like I was just like thinking back that quote, I remember that quote like yesterday, where you were just like talking about like different admins should talk to each other. And like, being in New York City, there's tons of schools. And in the United States too, like I firmly believe that, like our rollout of being online, or the school that is online, is solely online, would have been a little bit better if we just communicated with like other schools that were like, hey, what are you using to kind of hold kids accountable in terms of like, the work, right? What's working for you is like, for example, one of the things that we had problems with was the camera. So it was a big debate, pretty much when COVID started. Should it be on? Should it be on? Is that invasion of privacy? And I think a healthy like kind of conversation with other schools could have been like, hey, maybe this shouldn't be a thing that we penalize children for, because like this is all new to us. And like that's one of the things that like definitely is a reason why I feel like I need to um look for other voices, in
Mm.
terms of like listen intently, and then after listening with intent, digest it, and then see where those ideas can be actionable in the reins of my own classroom.
Oh yeah, that's so spot on. It's so the thing that you were describing is the admin mastermind group that we have, where we literally have
Mhm.
50 plus educators, 50 plus administrators from around the country, now around the world, that come together and they have conversations about how they're managing and how they're responding to different things in their schools, and they're learning and they're growing together. Because you're right, we live on these isolated islands, whether
Mhm.
you're an administrator or a teacher. We put
Mhm.
ourselves in these bubbles where we either shut everybody else out and close our door and just do our thing in our lane because we're so overwhelmed, or because we just want to, or we treat our school environments or our districts sort of like how Facebook does. You know, in Facebook, the algorithm is set up so that you only see people that you agree with, that you associate with, because they want you to stay in the app. They want you to see all the ads possible, because they know that as soon as you see something that you might disagree with, you might close out the app, and then there go their ad dollars. We
Mhm.
tend to do the same thing in schools with our schools, our districts. We surround ourselves with only people that see things and do things the same way as us. So it limits our growth. It limits our opportunity to have those
Mhm.
critical conversations, to lean in, to listen, to learn, to grow, and to find out that there are other people out there doing the things that would make our jobs easier and better if we just leaned in and listened. So I'm so glad that you brought that out. And I'm so glad that you're doing that work now. You are one of those voices that I'm leaning into and I'm listening to. You know, we've talked briefly just in passing about your podcast.
Mhm.
And you said that you started this because you didn't hear voices like yours out there telling this kind of story. Can you just talk about your podcast a little bit? What's the purpose behind it? Where do people find it? What is it all about?
So the purpose of the podcast initially started out for due to the pandemic, but the narrative and the structure is for particularly first generation teachers, or even like teachers that are in this first weird space to be a first year teacher. So that's why I started out, because like, like I said before, it's weird to navigate this newfound space of professionalism, because what I
Mhm.
found in undergrad when I was student teaching, like my cohort, it was odd. Like they either had an uncle or aunt that was a teacher, or their mom was a teacher, so they already had that kind of connection to
Mhm.
schooling, as opposed to me. Like I was just like the just in the classroom, just learning from a mentor teacher. So I felt like, in a sense, like I wanted to be a quasi mentor teacher for other first generation teachers or first year teachers that are out there. And that's the main reason like I started it. Like one of my I want to say one of my best episodes by myself is like things I wish I knew as a first year teacher. Right. And that's where I really like honed in, like, hey, you don't have to grade everything, or you don't have to like recreate the wheel for like your curriculum, right? There's materials, there's things that you can like, tweak that are already out there that you can use as a building block, a foundation to not feel overwhelmed as you start this career, because that's what leads to teacher burnout. And that's primarily why I started out the podcast, is to talk about my own journey as a first generation American in this academic space. And then yeah, it's been going good ever since. Like I got a series called Book Talks, where I find books that are applicable in the classroom to all teachers, especially like for me. I felt like as a teacher during student teaching and like while in undergrad, I felt like if I knew about all these books, like I would have been way more prepared for like my first year, second year, even now. Like, but you're still growing, and like you're still growing your craft even like after year 5, year 6, whatever. So that's why I started primarily the podcast, to just get my voice out there, and like, if you're a first generation teacher, you're not the only like solely one out there.
Your
So
story.
yeah. Yeah.
And that, I mean, that speaks so true. No matter what your story is, there are others out there battling the same things you're battling, who are going through the same things you're going through, celebrating the same things you're celebrating. Again, we don't have to do this alone. We don't have to be on these
Mhm.
islands. You are in one of the busiest cities in the world, and you still understand that people can feel isolated. I mean, you
Mhm.
are surrounded by people, but yet people can still feel so alone and isolated in what they're doing. So I appreciate you so much for recognizing that and reaching out and extending that olive branch to other people, and just trying to amplify their stories by sharing your story, letting people feel that encouragement and feel that hope, and letting them know that, hey, look at you. You are killing it right now. You are super successful, changing lives, changing destinies, because you see opportunity where other people see obstacles. So with this being said, because you do this podcast at regular intervals and you're used to having microphone in hand on your desk, speaking to the crowd, I want you to imagine right now that you're speaking to 25,000 people. But I imagine right now, Alex, you're speaking to 25,000 people. They're listening to you. They're riveted with your story, and they're curious. At the end of all of my episodes, I ask people to drop the mic and then walk off the stage. This is your opportunity with mic in hand, mic on the desk. As you think back on your journey, think back on your story and all the things that you've overcome, the things that you've done, the things that you're still doing or going to do. What is that mic drop moment that you want to leave people with? What is that thing that you want them to remember about your story, about you, or about themselves?
I think have value within yourself, and never feel that you're not good enough, especially like that's one thing that I struggled with. Like in my first year, I remember I struggled with imposter syndrome. Like I was like telling myself like I don't belong here, and then but own your space, own your classroom, or own whatever space you're in terms of like if you have doubt, reassure yourself by just kind of finishing whatever deliverable you have to do. Make sure you're hitting progress points, and if you fail, failing's okay. Failing's the first step to being sort of good at something, right? So it's true, because like if you never fail and you have this overarching sense of perfectionism, right, then when you do fail, right, how prepared are you, right, to learn from that instance? Yeah, so that would be, I guess, my mic drop moment is failing's okay. Be prepared to fail, right? But be prepared to learn from those failures.
Yeah.
And then, out of those, constant like failures, you'll develop and become a new and better person. You'll be better you in terms of whatever you're doing, whether it be your field, whether it be in the gym, right? It's not like everybody who like starts working at the gym New Year's, right? Like it has like the body of like a young Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? You got to work at that, right? And the same thing with like anything in life, right? Whether it be your career, right? Relationships, anything. Like first you're going to learn from like these experiences, and then, hopefully something positive will come out of it.
That's right. I mean, sometimes you got to experience heartbreak so that you can understand what love is all about. You
Right.
got to feel the pain of the weights crashing on your chest as you're lifting them up before you start to revel in the beauty that you can see in the mirror. I love that. And I think so often in our celebration of failure, we simply say failure is okay and we leave it at that. And I'm so glad that you didn't, that you went on to say, if you learn from it, if you reflect from it. We don't learn from failure. We learn from reflecting on failure. We learn from our attempt to say, what did I do wrong so that I can do better tomorrow? And I'm so, so glad that that was your mic drop moment, because it's powerful. I think it resonates with a lot of people as they're coming out of what has been a crazy 15, 16 months filled with failures. It would be so easy for people to just sweep that under the rug and say, I'm so glad that's behind me, move on, as opposed to look back and think about the lessons learned. Think about the things that they're now better at because they went through this, as opposed to just racing to get through it. So Alex, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate all that you are doing. Truly, I listen to your words. You speak to me. I feel like your episodes are truly you speaking directly to me. You've just got this sense about you that's just so calm, so reassuring, so hopeful, and so optimistic. And I'm so grateful for all that you're doing. And I just hope that you continue to do it for years and years to come, because you are changing lives of kids and old men like me. So I appreciate you, man. Just keep being amazing.
Thanks, man. And just one last thing before you go. For my podcast, if you want to check me out, First Gen Teacher Lens, you find me on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and yeah, you subscribe, leave a review. Hopefully, it's positive. That's the main thing I'm trying to maintain, positivity all around. But yeah, check me out. If not, do a Google search, First Gen Teacher Lens.
Awesome. Yeah. You stole my last question from me. That's it. So people, if you want to connect with this man, just look at it in the show notes. If you want to, if you're an overachiever and you actually read those things, feel free to scroll on down and click on those things and follow him. Or if you're auditory and you just heard what he said, follow him, subscribe to that podcast, leave ratings, and continue to learn and grow right alongside of him. Alex, again, thank you, man. Thanks for all that you do. Thanks for taking time out of your busy, busy day, your busy life to share your vision and your story with all of us. You're awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.